day you wake up to find out your dad's tried to commit suicide is incredibly difficult, but I've learned as I've got older to kind of use that as motivation. How can I make my life better? How can I help other people who are perhaps going through difficulties? I love helping businesses grow, and I know that the impact that that has, if they're seeing significant growth, is what drives me.
Welcome to The Curious Corner, where we unravel the stories behind our guests through the lens of curiosity. In this episode, I'm joined by Joel Stone, who is the co-founder of the marketing agency CodeBreak, is a co-author, international speaker, and host of the Stay Hungry podcast. Joel, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Great to finally have you on. I know we've been planning this for a while, and it's great to reconnect.
Yeah, no, good to see you, man.
Sweet. Okay, so first question. For those hearing about you for the first time, who is Joel Stone?
Who is Joel Stone? Okay, so I'm Joel. I run a marketing agency called CodeBreak. I'm the co-founder of that business. I write, speak, train, coach, and do marketing. So that's kind of my game. I'm an author. I speak on stages around the world, and I work with hundreds of small to medium-sized businesses on their marketing strategies.
Nice. Awesome. What does someone listening need to know about your childhood to understand the person who you are today?
So one of my talks that I do is called "Go Fuck Yourself." It's a politely titled talk, and it's about overcoming a lot of childhood adversity and early adulthood adversity to do what I want to do. So the reason I'm self-employed is partly that. My journey is because of that. So I'm pretty much a self-confessed geek. I love getting into the details of marketing for businesses in a work environment, but at home I'm not far different in terms of how I am. But my childhood was quite interesting. I've always been geeky, and I've always been hyper competitive. And I think the two combined is kind of pretty good for business, but also it's like a blessing and a curse. Don't play board games with me at Christmas. I'm a fucking nightmare. But I think a lot of that comes from my childhood. So the year I was born, my uncle committed suicide. So that was a couple of months before I was born. And obviously there was a lot of turmoil in my family. My grandparents were obviously devastated. My dad was devastated. And my dad's mental health wasn't very good either. So I kind of grew up with that, and I grew up with a parent with bipolar who sometimes very aggressive, sometimes very low and depressed and suicidal, sometimes not there because he was in hospital. So that was rough and tricky. But then on the other side of that, my mum, although she was going through extreme stress and anxiety herself, kind of demonstrated to me a work ethic I would otherwise have never been exposed to, because she was working multiple jobs to put food on the table, just to pay the bills. She would, work 2-3 jobs, then go see my dad in hospital, then come home, make sure me and my brother fed and watered. Just a real steely determination and sacrifice, really. There was nothing in it for her other than we were her kids. It wasn't like once we were fed, she settled down to a 4-course meal or something. She was sacrificing her life to make sure that we were brought up. And yeah, that kind of upbringing and seeing how bad life can get. And, as an example, the day you wake up to find out your dad's tried to commit suicide is incredibly difficult. But I've learned as I've got older to kind of use that as motivation to how can I make my life better? How can I make sure I don't miss out on doing the things I really want to do? How can I help other people who are perhaps going through difficulties, or not even significant difficulties? I love helping businesses grow, and I know that the impact that has, for those business owners and their team and their families, if they're seeing significant growth, not just the financial side of it, but the positivity that brings to those people is kind of what drives me. So that was a long answer, but that's kind of a loose outline of what went on in my childhood that has made me want to be who I am today.
For sure. And, as you said, a lot of, I guess, like trauma and adversity throughout your childhood. And that no doubt has like an impact on who you become later in life. So, yeah, I feel like you kind of touched on it a bit, but what impact do you think that did have on you?
So it's definitely a double-edged sword. If there's a disaster, if something really bad is happening, I'm the guy to ask to help because it doesn't faze me. I've been there. But like a paper cut or like a pebble in my shoe really affects me. And so like I have like on or off. I don't have like levels of despair. So I can be like just as rattled by like something little as I am by something big. So the big stuff I'm better because I kind of can cope with that better. But on the positive side, I've actively taken like big steps in my own life to do the things I want to do, achieve the things I want to achieve. I'm a risk taker, hence running my own business, and couple that with being competitive. Obviously, I mean, the business has been up to 7 figures and then down to near zero when COVID happened. And I think most people would have given up. But I took it back up to 7 figures with the help of my business partner. Yeah, I think if I hadn't been through kind of that adversity and built significant resilience, I wouldn't have done that. But I also would never claim, because I appreciate the subject matter that I'm talking about is sensitive and there's people that might listen to this that could be struggling. I would never claim that I've got it solved. That is not the case at all. It's a work in progress all the time. Like my traumas and demons come back to haunt me quite frequently. I just don't let them control me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, as you said, naturally pros and cons to both. But I remember you saying a while ago that I know like you like crashed your car and like usually for someone that would like ruin their week, their month, their year. But for you, it's just like great perspective on things, like not being phased by it and like it's an inconvenience and but like you can get it fixed and it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, for context, I got myself a nice car because I thought that's what you do when you're successful. I don't feel like that anymore so much, but I crashed it real bad, and it was at a time where I was pushing a little bit too hard at work, and I was quite anxious and struggling with my sleep and stuff because I was pushing very hard. And when I got in the car that day, I actually had the thought, I don't think I should be driving today, but I didn't really have the choice not to. But then the reality of the situation was I actually had 2 staff members in the car when I crashed it. And that is like, obviously we were very lucky. I came off the worst and I didn't come off that bad. The car definitely came off worse, to be fair. But I crashed the car into another car with 3 people in it and their dog. And fucking hell. Yeah, that was a massive injection of perspective of just like, it could have been like absolute catastrophe. And first thing I thought was, I hope everyone's okay. I knew everyone was okay in my car. So then I was, I hope everyone's okay in that car. Then I realised there was a dog in that car. And then I was like, oh God, I hope the dog's okay once I realised the people were okay. And then I just took responsibility for the situation and took control of the situation and got the insurance and the police involved and whatnot. And it didn't faze me, which is really strange because then the whole insurance process, which is like something loads of people go through afterwards, really bothered me, even though that was the little thing. The crash should have been the big thing. And but I guess like the niggle from that was that the police told me afterwards that it probably wasn't my fault, but it was good that I took the blame because it needed dealing with quickly because we closed a dual carriageway.
Yeah, bit of
Yeah,
a block.
but yeah. So it is interesting, like that kind of thing I can deal with. I've had examples as a kid, like where the police have shown up or an ambulance has been called, or Like we didn't live in a particularly nice neighbourhood, so we had various run-ins with like drug dealers and things like that. And those things, although obviously I get wound up in the moment, they just don't faze me much, which I guess that's why I could deal with the pressure of business, that kind of thing. Not normal.
Who wants to be normal anyway? Normal's boring.
Oh, no way. Yeah, no way.
I think the other interesting thing you said within that was obviously COVID, and I know that was quite a challenging time for you and your business. You know, you're losing clients, the whole like shift into remote working, and yeah, like I believe you even like sold your house just to like keep a payroll going to not make anyone furlough, which I think is
Yeah.
actually like a really underrated um, thing that could get lost. Because like for me personally, when I see that, I'm like you're fully like putting your employees first, right? Like above your like your own self.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be completely honest about that situation. So, Andy, my business partner, and I had separate businesses before we made CodeBreak, and CodeBreak didn't have a payroll until about 6 months before COVID. So, although we'd existed as a company for a long time, our employees were employed in our separate companies. And then 6 months before COVID, not thinking anything was coming, obviously, we moved everyone over to CodeBreak. COVID happened, and literally within 2 days, we'd lost 80% of our client base. Everyone just shit themselves. It was, and you know, in all fairness, if people roll back to then, that first month or so, we all thought we were in serious trouble. It wasn't. No one was bothered about business. Like people were like looting the supermarkets. It was mad. So because of that, because the payroll had only just been started, we didn't actually qualify for furlough, and we didn't qualify for bounce back loans either. So that caused us a real squeeze. And because we're a small business, everyone's expertise in the business is different. So it's not like you can just say to someone, "Oh, you sit on your ass for the next 2 years because we'll cover it." Because it's like, well, yeah, okay, great. Now we haven't got a Google Ads expert, or great, we haven't got a website expert. And the few clients that did support us, I felt a great loyalty to them as well. I wanted to obviously keep the staff in jobs, keep them okay. They were scared. We employ a lot of young people. They were scared. This, you know, I hate the word unprecedented now because of COVID, but it was unprecedented at the time. They were worried. Clients were worried. A few clients were very loyal to us and continued to pay us, even though I couldn't see. You know, for some of them, they'd been shut down. So like that was very kind. And then, yeah, I couldn't pay myself. Andy, my business partner, couldn't pay himself. And it just got to the point where, in order to keep the taps running, I had to sell my house and take some equity out of my house and inject it into the business to just keep going. And that was fucking challenging, yeah.
Yeah, I bet. At that point where, like you say, you're having to essentially like sell like your own possessions just to like re-inject it back in because you believe in this so much and you believe you'll get through it. But
Yeah.
like in that moment, it's like you don't know for certain.
Yeah, so I told a story on a podcast recently that I've never told before, so I'll share it again now. But it was such an odd time because I was so under pressure, like so under pressure. And so all my anxiety and my own depression like reared up because I was running on empty. Like I was working 14, 15, 16-hour days, 7 days a week just to try and keep things ticking. And a lot of that was like cold calling and begging, and yeah, it was hard. So we had that situation. We had the idea that I was going to have to sell the house and bring money into the business. For some reason, we decided to write a book at the same time, which is great in hindsight, but at the time it was an extra pressure. So I was having to show like real positivity and drive for the team, for our clients, you know, for my business partner, for my wife. But behind closed doors, I was really suffering. And I actually got to the point where I was like hoping I got COVID and it finished me off because I just couldn't see a way out. And I was like, well, but I knew that was a stupid, illogical thought as well. But that's how bad it got. So like 75% of the time in public view, I was driving as hard as I could to push the business to where it needed to be and secure people's jobs. And like, I was like one of those idiots that was doing the Friday night Zoom pub quiz for all my mates and stuff. Like, just put myself under more and more pressure. But I knew if I'm in public view, I would be okay. But yeah, really suffering behind the scenes, trying to prop all that up.
Yeah, that's a very challenging period. But I guess like now on the other side of it, now you like people still have like shit going on in your life, but
Yeah, man.
like when you've been through something like that, it almost like, well, I can almost go for anything now.
Yeah, you think like,
Or am I wrong, Matt? I don't know. Tell me.
no, well, the truth is that like you do build resilience, but you have to practice at it. Like, and I think like the other side of it is like when you see success in business or success in investments or whatever it is that you do, you have to be really careful to not let your ego get carried away. Like that, like pride comes before a fall type thing. And I've found consistently, like whenever I start to believe my own hype, something happens to knock me down a peg. And so I'm really cautious about that, and I think it's really important to like remain humble. But yeah, it was a weird time for me, COVID, because my parents aren't together anymore, and my dad's mental health actually got a lot worse in that period, and he ended up getting sent to prison. So I was balancing all that, and my dad got sent to prison, and I was kind of like it sounds like I'm making this up. Even when I tell it now, I'm like, this is fucking ridiculous. Like, it was just like taking a kicking over and over and over and over again. But then, like I say, I feel like because of that, I can probably achieve, like, not in an arrogant sense, but feel like I can achieve anything. It's like, well, if I can get that, if I can be punched down that low, I can push up that much more.
100%. What is something you wish you knew before starting your own business?
You could write a book about every mistake I've made and give it to people as a guide of what not to do. That would be that would be one way of looking at it. So, I I wish I'd understood just how hard it is to start a business with nothing, and why so few people do that. Because I had to grind so hard for the first couple of years to just make a living, and it served me well now. It's an underappreciated trait to have that work ethic, but I think if I could have gone back to that point, I would like real basic, but I bought a really good computer because that's what I thought I needed, and that wiped out my funds. And what I should have done in hindsight is just got something basic, used the money to promote myself, got more money in, and then reinvested in myself, and I probably would have been 2 or 3 years ahead of where I actually was.
Interesting. And what is something you consider to be non-negotiable in business?
Do what you say you will. So in business and in life, if you say to someone, yeah, I'll do that, and then you don't, with no good reason, this is something I really struggle with. And like, people are too happy and find it too easy to let other people down, and I'm not into that at all. I think like, and I get picked on for it a little bit. People say to me like, "Oh, you're too much of a yes man. You don't say no enough." And I was like, it's not about the fact that I won't say no, because I will say no. But once you've said yes, you should follow through. And I mean, we're fortunate how I met you, and the environment like we met in. There's a lot of very positive people who are really supportive and very much follow through on their actions. But I've noticed, the amount of times in business I've met people who don't honour their contracts or liquidate their company and then start it up under their wife's name, or like all these things where I'm like, hang on, I'm having to meet my commitments. Why aren't you? And I find that hard. I think like some of that probably stems back to childhood stuff, feeling a bit let down about certain things where you're like, actually, the sooner you accept that people are kind of fallible and they will let you down, the better. But for me, a non-negotiable is if I've said I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And like podcast now, tomorrow I'm going to a client's live event in London, but it's actually my birthday weekend this weekend, so I'm in the bad books with my wife. But it's like I said I'd do it, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah, no, I like that. And yeah, I don't know what it is, but I do agree with you that it seems like nowadays, like, people's word of mouth doesn't seem to matter as much anymore. And I don't really know why that is, but yeah, like, I'm a big believer in, like, the reputation you have, and, the people that like really know you as like friends or family or whatever, like, like, that reputation carries, right? And ultimately that's like how you lean to then having, experiences or meeting, friend of a friend, and like new connections, and it just opens up a lot of opportunity. And yeah, like, not having that at all, and like reverse of that, and just wanting to, probably more of a short term, long term thing. Like, I feel like short term, if you have a great reputation, you probably don't notice it as much, but then long term, you got to see the impact. And
Yeah,
like short term, let's face it, you can be a dick and you can piss a couple of people off, but then like long term, it's gonna show.
yeah, exactly that. And I think you've got to like consider about how much things you're committing yourself to. Is it better to commit yourself 100% to 5 things than 10% to 100 things? And I don't think there's many people who deliberately let people down. It's just so easily done now because we all over communicate. We all like are on our phones way too much. We're all on WhatsApp saying, yeah, I'll do that. And before you know it, you're going to like 3 things on the same day and you're going to have to let 2 people down.
Yeah, for sure. What message would you like to share with other aspiring business owners who are still early in their entrepreneurial journey?
So something my business partner says that I think came from his dad is that you've got 2 ears and one mouth. Use them in that ratio. So when you're starting in business, it feels like it's very easy to feel like, oh, I'm the first person to have ever thought of this. I'm the first person to be doing this. This is a new way of looking at the market. People are going to flock to me, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not true. Been in marketing for 15 years and nobody's come to me with a new idea. It just doesn't happen. They might have a slightly new slant on it. They might they might be better at it. They might be more profitable, more effective, whatever it might be. But the businesses that I've seen be the most successful were the ones that listened to what the market wanted, listened to what their suppliers can supply, listened to the kind of need of the market, so what pain people were in or what desires they have, and then executed really well on that gap. What a lot of businesses do is they look at what they're good at and then decide the world should want it, and that's not the same.
Yeah, I think listening nowadays is kind of, I don't want to say underrated, but like, a lot of people just like speak their opinion for the sake of it versus like listening and like taking in. And there's also a thing nowadays where people don't necessarily like to take on board other people's perspectives. They just like tunnel vision is like their way or the highway, and they're not willing to meet someone else in the middle and be like, oh, actually, I do kind of agree with you on this side, but
Like, I'm older than you, and there used to be this thing called debate, like back in the day. So, like, people would have an opinion, like an educated person would have an opinion, and then another educated person would have a different opinion, and then they would share their opinions and come up with a better opinion. And that was a really good system. That worked really well. And now we seem to have this like polarized view, and it's been massively emphasized by the internet and social media and like propaganda and whatever. But you're right or you're wrong, you're left or you're right, you're black or you're white. It's all very like absolute, and I don't really cope well with that. I quite like sitting in a room and hearing 4 or 5 wildly different opinions and then coming to my own conclusion. And that's not very fashionable at the moment. It's like you have to like be, and like people will say things like, "Oh, don't be on the fence because you'll get splinters," and it's like I'm not on the fence. I'm just being balanced because you guys are being insane. And yeah, it's quite scary. Like this country, we've obviously got a general election probably this year. It's just like madness. Like no one's presenting a balanced view. They're just like throwing things at you like they're facts. It's really weird.
I also think it's funny, I agree with you on that, and everyone will then all of a sudden be like an expert in politics. But I also just think there's this thing about if you've got, say, like 10 people in a room, and if someone's like doing all the talking, then they must know what they're doing and they must be like 100% right. But I
Yeah,
think it's interesting the person that's in the room just being quiet in the corner, and people sometimes perceive it as like, oh, they don't have an opinion, or they're just like being shy or whatever, or just But then if they're just like you say, taking in everyone else's opinion, I've seen something before on the internet, and it's like if you're in a room of people, then you should listen to everyone else's opinion, and then, as you said, form your own opinion after everyone has spoken, and then essentially be like the last person to speak, and then you've taken on board what everyone has said. And I don't know if I mean to do that or not, but I feel like I'm definitely more of a listener, and then I'll speak when I've heard what people have said.
yeah, yeah. See, I definitely can sometimes speak a bit too soon, and I'm not going to say otherwise. But I'm quite sensitive, so I also absorb quite a lot of information from what people are saying when they don't think I'm listening, and I've like I really find it interesting, and you and I met in the Web3 world, and you get such a different array of characters and people who, like, some people who have literally lived their entire existence on the internet and are quite rigid in their views, and then other people who are like have lived their entire existence on the internet and yet are like wonderfully balanced and diverse in their views, and you kind of like, well, how does the same thing produce such extreme differences?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting for sure. Um, Vulnerability is a strength. So, how has your perspective on vulnerability evolved over time, and what have you learned from embracing it? And I guess the reason why I ask that is just because obviously, like you've been on many podcasts and you do the public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and like you're very open book on talking about your childhood and like your ups and your downs. Um, yeah, and I think there's still this perception of like it's not good to be vulnerable, but like I personally disagree with that. But yeah, curious to get your take on that.
So only since COVID have I been an open book, and I just made an active decision, and I very much thought it was a weakness to be vulnerable, definitely as a child. And part of my competitive edge as well, that like if I showed weakness, then maybe people would take advantage of that, and I would lose in whatever it was I was doing. And then what I'd sort of managed to disassociate was the difference between weakness and vulnerability. So I'm vulnerable to all sorts. I've got an anxious disposition. I can get very low. I'm like a sensitive character, so I feel things, I think, more than some people, that kind of thing. But I'm no longer afraid to share that. If someone listens to me on a podcast, sees me on stage, and finds out that I've had suicidal thoughts, or that I've been really low, or some of the things I've been through, and they make an active decision that they want to disassociate from me because of that, fuck it, I don't care. Like, that's their loss. Especially because I'm telling that story not because I want sympathy or because I want business sales, or it's because it might help someone who's going through the same. And so I've kind of flipped it now. I think I work in marketing, obviously, and I really struggle with the idea of these like coaches, consultants, business owners that rent a Lamborghini and try and post the perfect Instagram life. It's not true. And like, I've met millionaires, I've met some billionaires, and some of them are happy, but a lot of them are not happy people. They are not just private jets and Lamborghinis and holidays in Dubai. That is not the reality of business. And so I like to sort of play both sides of the coin and show people, well, look, these are all the things I'm achieving. This is my bucket list that I'm ticking off. This is what I do with my wife and how I help her achieve her bucket list. But these are the sacrifices and kind of the things I have to go through for that to happen. And if you can't have all this good without this bad, and that's just kind of like how the balance of life, that's how it works. I can't be a positive and helpful person in marketing, in life, as a husband, if I'm not willing to show my vulnerability, because I'm hiding my true self. And that was really hard for a long time, because I thought, tell people the truth about some of these things, they're going to lock me up or something like that, like something really horrible. And then, or they're just going to think less of me, or they'll never work with me. And now I'm kind of like, actually, 9 out of 10 people are going through the same or worse or different, and they'll just find it great and refreshing that I'm telling the story and that they can relate to me, and maybe it will help them or give them a different angle on things. And if everyone did that, the world would be a lot nicer, easier place, I think.
100%. And I think, like you said, you nailed it. Like, you just make yourself a lot more relatable and just a lot more human, and like being authentic. And yeah, like you said, you get people and they kind of have this fake persona and put on a mask and pretend they're something they're not. But like, I don't know, like, again, I think if you're authentic and true to yourself, then you can do that forever, right? If you're trying to constantly put on a fake persona, then either eventually people are going to see through it, or you're going to like, burn out or do something different. But, and like, even like with CodeBreak, like I know on the website, it's like, this is who we are, this is who we're for, and this is the people we're not for. If you're this person, then great, we're for you. If you're not this person, then sorry, we're not for you, but like, that's just who we are. Like, either love it or hate it. So yeah, I think that authenticity piece is, super undervalued. So I actually found something interesting you said. And you said that you showed me how to drop resentment and take responsibility for me. So could you further explain what you meant by that?
Fucking hell. When did I say that? Do you know? Or where?
I think it was a year ago.
Wow.
It was on Twitter.
Wow, okay. So I grew up with a lot of resentment, like a why me attitude. And so we were watching Eric Thomas at VCon, actually, and a lot of his talk was about why me, like, and like in my case, I've lost friends to suicide, nearly lost my dad, mental health issues. Why me? Life's so hard. And I think it was Eric Thomas. I think he said, "Why not you?" And I was like, "Shit, yeah, why not me?" And all that resentment and all that kind of built up negativity drained out of me. I was like, shit, like, you don't have to resent what you've been through. You can choose to use it as fuel for positivity. And when, like, I'm not going to present that I've got that nailed. When I'm at my worst, I can still resent things and still, get pretty upset. But when I'm at my best, all of those things I've been through are fuel to achieve more, to help people more. And that's kind of what I was getting at, was that there's been 2 VCons. The first one I went on my own and I didn't know a soul. And I barely spoke to anyone the whole time I was there. I didn't have the social confidence to connect. It was very, very outside of my comfort zone to go. And then when I came to the second one, I'd been introduced to a lot of people and met people, yourself included, that just blew my mind how nice they could be with zero ask. They didn't want anything in return. And like a real diverse group of people from different backgrounds, different cultures, just being nice because it's the right thing to do. And I went home really emotional from VCon. I was kind of just like, fuck, like there's so much more I can do to be a better person. And not like because I was a bad person, but because it was just really inspiring to like meet people who are very good at shifting their perspective to positive things and then using that as like a powerful tool for even just for like basic communication, but for the things that they're doing in their various passions.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, I think coming out of that, like I say, I like both times I felt super inspired, and um it's almost like now the level that I try hold myself to. And like if there's a day where I feel like I dropped the ball having a bad day, then the next day I wake up and it's almost like a reset. And it's like next time I'm going to meet all these people, like I want to make sure that I've grown, that I've improved, and that that I'm just like keeping myself to that standard. And it's the accountability piece basically. It's just finding that group of people where you're accountable to, and
Yeah, it's like that whole thing of like you're the sum of the 6 people you spend the most time with. And when you've spent 3 or 4 days with a group of really positive people, you the difference is insane. And then if you can carry that into the environment you're going back to and lift people up, it's just so good. Like so good.
100%. Looking back on your journey so far, what role has tenacity played in your overall success?
So yeah, tenacity is what's got me through. I don't think I'd be alive without tenacity. Like anyone who's suffered any level of anxiety or depression will know that when it gets bad, just the tenacity to get up, the tenacity you require to just get up and face the day is mega. But I'm also like stubborn as a mule, I guess. Like that's like my competitive side. I don't know when I'm beat, and I don't want like my team to ever know when they're beat. I don't want my family to ever know when they're beat. I don't want to ever stray into a place in my mind, which again I think is in some ways what's kept me alive. I never want to stray to a place in my mind where I could be beat. Now I've matured and I'm much better with losing in certain scenarios, but I never see that as like an out and out loss. I'm like when bad things happen now, I can step away and write a list of everything I've learned from it and pick up on all the positives I can pull from that situation. And yeah, that kind of tenacious attitude. But there's a little bit of it that it's kind of bred into me as well, because obviously based on what I've told you about my mum, she was incredibly tenacious to just put food on the table. Like my dad has been through the ringer with his illness and he's a very tenacious man. My brother is an incredibly tenacious person to the point where he doesn't really play much sport because he's so tenacious that he's worried he's going to embarrass himself. And like it's a big part of like my life. Like the book I wrote is called Stay Hungry. My podcast is called Stay Hungry. It says Stay Hungry on the wall in like 4 places in the room I'm in right now, because I never want material success to define who I am. I should still do the right things and do the right things by my family, by my friends, by my staff, by everyone, regardless of how much material success I've got. And if you lose your tenacity, I think you can lose kind of sight of your purpose and just become comfortable, and that's just not a good place for me.
And then finally, why do you do what you do?
So I do an exercise by Simon Sinek called the 7 Stages of Why. And I run group workshops where I tell people to write down why do they do what they do, because there's no point approaching a marketing company or doing advertising unless you know why you do what you do. and they write down an answer. So like most people will write, like if you, let's say it's an accountant will write down, I do what I do because I love numbers and I love making sure that other people have got their numbers right. And you'll be like, well, okay, that's a pretty shit reason. So then I ask the question, and why is that? And then they go, well, actually, when I was a kid, my dad's business went bust and it was horrible. Okay. And why is that? Well, we had to sell our house and my parents separated and my sister went to live with my mum and I had to live with my dad. Oh, and why is that? And by the time you get to the bottom of it, you'll get like, I've had like rooms full of people in tears because they've realised that the reason they do what they do is very different to the surface level answer. And the honest answer for me, that there's kind of two parts to mine. So when I was 17, a really good friend of mine committed suicide, and I didn't see it coming because I was very caught up in myself at the time. And she actually asked me to ring her the day that it happened, and I couldn't. And I carried an awful lot of guilt for that for a long time, and it was very, very tricky. And I promised myself that I would never let that happen again. That when someone else is asking for my help, even if it's indirectly or whatever, that I should be aware of that and try and help as best I can. So that's kind of like the one side of why I do what I do. The other side of why I do what I do is I'm very geeky, and like my brain fires quickly, sometimes too quickly. So like when you speak before you think, like I can be a little bit like that. And like sometimes my humor can seem cruel because I'm sharp-tongued and sort of quick-witted in that sense. But it's also like something that serves me really well when I'm looking at people's businesses, when I'm looking at their situation, where if I can get hold of what their purpose is, what their skill set is, what the need of their market is, what their numbers are, I can very quickly look at the opportunity and break it down for them. And my driver for that is, well, I've seen what it's like when your mum has to work 2, 3, 4 jobs to put food on the table. And I know no matter what background you're from, particularly in the UK, it doesn't have to be that way. There are opportunities there if you can see them. But I think a lot of people aren't able to see them because nobody's ever shown them. And that's a real driver for me, that if I can show people how to crack open an opportunity and take it, like, because if you've got nothing to lose, but nobody tells you that. So I have these like two drivers. One, I don't like the idea of people suffering and I really want to help them. And two, I really enjoy cracking open opportunities for others. Like the biggest thrill for me is to come into the office on a Monday and someone like a client's emailed over the weekend just saying like how transformative what we've done has been for their business, or I'll see a client that's made it into the news because of something we've done, or I'll see something online because of something we've done. And it's a real buzz to be able to come in and have the team meeting and tell the staff members that were involved in that what an impact they've had, and to explain to them that it's not just about the fact that that client has won an award, but they can tell their kids they've won an award, and the impact is massive. And like, it's really humbling to be able to just have a little part in that.
I love that. Okay, we'll end it there. But Joel, thanks so much for coming on today and for the very open conversation. For anyone listening, if you want to follow Joel, all the links will be in the description. And of course, make sure to check out CodeBreak if you need any help with marketing if you're a business. And of course, check out the Stay Hungry podcast as well.
Cheers, man. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us, to leave a review, and to connect with us on our socials.